Okay.
And
Hello.
we're talking about writing. We're talking about everything that happens before pre-production even begins.
You have your story. You know what it is that you want to write about in
Hmm.
your mind. What happens then?
The very first thing that happened with this script was I was like minding my own business, doing who knows what. I don't even remember where or when this happened, but a very clear image dropped into my head of a woman and a child sitting on a park bench. Um, and this was, I don't even know how long ago this was, to be honest, probably sometime in the last couple of years. I did go back and look at my notes in my iPhone and found a note from February 2024 that said short film dash someone meets their inner child on the playground. Yeah, that was like the very first thing. And so I wrote it down and then I just let it be. In the past year and change since I've gone freelance, I've had a lot of other freelance work going on. So I was busy with that and I just kind of trusted that that would eventually it would eventually reveal more to me when it was ready to. And then, yeah, I shared a bit about this in the last episode, but in May of last year, my partner lost a very close family member. We spent some time down in Sydney, where he's from, for the funeral. And when I got back, it was very clear to me again that this idea had something to do with the loss of this family member. And almost immediately upon coming back to New York, I sat down and wrote the script in one fell swoop um, in like early June of last year. But what I'll say is that draft is like, I went back and looked at it in preparation for this episode, and like literally not a single line of dialogue is the same as the
Wow.
script that we ended up shooting. However, like the structure was actually all there and the ideas were all there,
Interesting.
even though like the story needed a lot of work. I mean, it was like there was a car crash, there was a proposal. It was like
Oh,
beyond different than
yeah.
so it was like it still had the same structure, but like very different things were in each little section of that structure. So yeah, what I'll say is that even though that script was nothing like the final result, it was so important to just get a first script down.
Mm.
Um, because then you have something to work off of. And after I wrote that script, I actually started working on my treatment. And I think there's various ways you can go about this process of like treatment, then script writing or outlining treatment, script writing, whatever. And I think what works best for everyone is going to be kind of their own journey to figure out. And honestly, I'm still figuring it out for me too. But I do think that having a script down, even one that was going to change, helped me actually start the treatment because then I had a baseline for like what I was at least trying to do. Does that make sense?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense because it at least gives you who are the players? What are the themes? What are, even if the inciting incident changes, there's a general concept of what the inciting incident is and what the factors are that come into play.
Yeah. Yeah. And then for the treatment, I mean, the treatment is just beyond important and something I didn't know a lot about before starting this process.
Can you start like in terms of a treatment, what are the components of a treatment?
It's essentially a deck, so
Hmm.
like a PowerPoint, a PDF, a Google Slides, what call it what you will, where you are outlining the information of your story in kind of prose form. So for me, that is a high level view of the story. It includes my director's statement, why am I making this film and what is my personal connection to it? The why behind the film, which I think becomes increasingly important when you're trying to get a film funded or sell a film. This, was self-funded, so it was more of an exercise, but I think still an important one. And that why is like, what is happening in the world today that makes this film relevant? And then it's a look at your characters, really defining who your characters are, really getting into the nitty-gritty of your plot and your plot structure, and visuals. That's super important, putting as the director, and the writer. I think the treatment is kind of like putting your director hat on. The script is more of my writer hat. So it's like, how am I translating, in this case, my own script into a visual look and feel for the screen? Um, and yeah, you're kind of forcing your own hand in making that treatment, because you are asking yourself questions about, who is your character, what is this plot structure, and working out all of these things. And through that process, I actually realized, that I wanted my story to align more closely with the events, of real life, I suppose.
Mhm.
And then that treatment ends up being your calling card for how you get people involved in the project. So I sent that to you and got you on board, before sending you a script. I sent it to the DP, I sent it to the editor, really any of your top line collaborators. This treatment is going to be how you get people interested and excited, which is obviously very important. You can't make a film by yourself.
Mhm.
And I think that was an interesting thing for me to learn too, that I didn't know before. Like, I was surprised to experience how much the script continued to evolve all the way through. It was very much a collaboration between the two of us. Once I sent the script, once you signed on to the project with the treatment, I actually sent you draft 3. I went back and looked last night.
Oh,
But there was 8 drafts in total before we got to the shooting script. So, you know, draft 1 was just like brain dump on the page. Then I worked on my treatment for like 6 weeks, which was a long time. Maybe it won't take me so long in the future, but I was new, so that's fine. And then that allowed me to get a second draft and a third draft out. And then when I sent it to you, that's when it really became, your feedback continued to shape the script for drafts 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8.
mhm.
That's how those drafts kind of progressed, was really you giving feedback. And then eventually, once we started casting and I started hearing actors read the script and the callbacks and the chemistry reads and then on to rehearsals, um, that really informed kind of the later scripts as well.
Yeah, yeah. That's such an important part of the script writing process that I don't know that everybody realizes, like thinking to the table read and finally hearing every line said in the order of the script by the people who would be saying it on film. And certain lines, like even a line that's just like, oh, that's a little bit clunky for that person to say. Filmmaking is an iterative process, even till the final edit is complete. Yeah, I think, not being afraid to continue to hone and polish and stress test is such an important part of the process.
Yeah. And a vulnerable part,
Yeah.
say, because
Yeah.
I sent you draft 3, which I have some lines that stuck all the way through to the final product, a handful, not too many, but some. And again, like the structure kind of remained the same, but a lot of it changed, which meant that, you're sharing work with someone uh at a phase where, it's not perfect, obviously, but again, I just I was really, yeah, surprised that um I don't know, that you could even kick off a project with someone knowing that the script wasn't perfect, knowing that the script still
Mhm.
had places that it needed to get to, but that was so valuable, because I just think I would have been working on that script forever by myself. getting,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
so yeah, that was kind of new information for me.
Mm.
I'm curious to hear kind of your side of the script development process. Because yeah, it changed, the script changed a lot between probably like, and pretty quickly, I suppose. Like, I think I sent you the script end of August, and I think you probably made me stop making changes like mid-October, maybe like 2 weeks before we shot, because I probably would have made changes forever. So that's what, like 6 weeks
Yeah.
where we got
Mhm.
through like 5 drafts, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I will say I read the treatment and I was like, this is great. This is a beautiful story. There's a really fully realized vision here. These characters feel like real people with real motivations and life experiences that have shaped them, and these visual references are so beautiful. And like, as we've discussed, like I was like, I'm in before I even got a script in hand. Reading the first script, it was a little rough around the edges, but that also allowed me to then come in and be a part of that process. You're sitting in a room and it's just like you're screaming into a void when you're writing these scripts. And like for some people that, maybe they really don't want input, but I think it sometimes also creates blind spots. And I was really grateful to be able to be a part of it um, and for it to feel so collaborative. And I think it requires a lot of trust, I think probably on both sides, to go through a process like that, where you have this story that is very meaningful to you that you're trying to tell, but to trust that you're bringing in this collaborator who's going to be respectful and nurturing and aware of the vulnerability, of the vulnerable state that you're in, and who's going to come in and do everything they can to just help you get to where you need to go with the story. And then on the flip side, I think there were definitely, reading so I guess the V3 of the script, but the V1 for me, I remember I had kind of a long email of,
Mm.
of notes for you that I sent over. And it's this moment of like, how is this person going to take this?
Mm.
Are they going to, be like, F you, this is, I don't appreciate all of this, or is it going to be hurtful, I guess, to them, or is it going to be like, yeah, okay, taking a step back from me as the one who's so in this writing it, like, are these points valid, and are these things that I need to revisit? And so I think like that level of trust is very important, and I think the mutual respect of like knowing that we're working towards a common goal and there's a way to go about it, and leaving some room for discussion around a point, and you know being willing to sort of like compromise on
Mhm.
things, like if there are certain elements or lines or a way that you get from point A that you feel really strongly about, and I push back on. And then it's like, no, this is why this is the way that it is. To be open to that as well, I think is really important. And what we did, I remember like between V3 and V4, you did make kind of a big structural update, which I won't get into because I don't want to give anything away. But in the first reading through, I was like, oh, I really like this, but why?
Mhm.
Why is this happening? And then we talked about it. And I was like, I don't know if I totally see it, but I think I just like, can you explain why
Yeah.
this is how this comes about? and like why this fits this story, why this makes sense for what this person is going through. And you gave me a very succinct, very thoughtful answer. And it was like, yeah, okay, that makes perfect sense. And I think that's wonderful. And
Yeah.
stay in.
Yeah. And I think that, yeah, I think that is such an important like part of the collaborative process and, a willingness to not just shut something down, but like hear the other person out, I think is so important. Um, and both sides as well, because I think especially as like the writer and the creative, it's very easy to be like, no, they don't understand my vision, you know what I mean? Um, and like you're gonna get some notes that do feel like that in life and that's fine. But I think for me, I remember just feeling a huge sense of relief that someone else was
Mm,
on this with me, if it was a younger version of me, I'm sure I would have received that email very differently. So I think it definitely, I'm in the stage of my life and in the headspace and have done the work to be open to collaboration to the point where I'm like, I never want to do anything alone again. Um,
mm. What, can you speak a little bit more to like how you think you would have received it, a younger version of you, and what
yeah.
and how your perspective or life experience has changed?
Oh, it would have just been such an ego hit. That's what it would have been at the end of the day. Like my ego would have just died and it would have felt like, you hated the script and then the spiral to you'll never be good enough and what do you think you're doing here? And then you just quit filmmaking, walk away and never tried to do it again. Um, it would have been that swift
Mm.
spiral downward.
Yeah, I think that really speaks to a level of maturity and just bigger picture thinking and understanding that just because someone has notes doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means they maybe see something different or they're just trying to push you to get it to the best that they know you can make it. Going back to, having read the treatment and then being like, let's do this, and then reading the first version of the script that I read, and I was like, okay, this needs some work. This
Mhm.
needs some work, which I think, yeah, you got to iterate on a script.
Mhm.
And I was like, let's see what happens when I give my notes, and then what V3 to V4 does look like. And even though it wasn't like I sent my first round of notes, you sent back this V4 of the script, and we were like, okay, we're done. It was like, oh, this is so hitting the the direction and the tweaks that need to be made. Like this is so trending in the right direction, and like clearly, my call outs helped it get there, and the way you interpreted my whatever notes I had. Like it was such a step up that it was like, yeah, we're gonna get there. We're definitely gonna get there.
The other thing I'll say about notes, and I'm definitely not the first person to say this, I feel like maybe as the writer, when you're getting notes, like maybe you don't agree with every note or suggestion, but I do think it's worth on thinking about like what is the sort of underlying flag, concern, thing that's not hitting
Mhm.
the right way. So it's like maybe there's a suggestion and you're like, that's not it. Doesn't make sense that this person would wear a blue shirt instead of a red shirt. Who knows?
Yeah, yeah.
But it's like, why is that red shirt bothering her? Like, what is it about the red
Mhm.
shirt that isn't like sitting right here? And actually, does it have something to do with her pants? Again, this is a strange
Mhm.
metaphor, but like, if it is like if it's dingings, if someone else is getting a little ping about it, it's
Mhm.
about what is not working here, even if you don't like sort of the surface level suggestion.
Yeah. Which that's a great framing for it, because that's something that I've thought about, and even in, thinking back through this process, and an important learning I have had, or I'm still a skill I'm still developing, is how you provide that feedback, bringing things to the writer director's attention in a broader way, so that then as the creative, it is their decision what they do with that note, and there's to ensure that my feedback isn't overly heavy-handed. I'm
Yeah.
pointing out things that need to be pointed out, but I'm also not trying to get in there and like, let me rewrite this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I feel what I'm remembering is that I feel like if we've been working on a section for a minute and there's been a few rounds, it's like, and I'm like, I can't figure this thing out, or it's like a word choice thing, or I feel like by the end it was really like down to the line, down to the word,
Mm,
what is being conveyed here. I feel like if we had gone around a couple times on a piece of dialogue or a section, then you would come in and be like, what's this? How about this? Or what about this? Having
mhm.
more specific suggestions, which like frankly, I don't even remember if I'm sure there was moments when I did just take those. I'm also sure there were moments when I didn't, but that's what helped me get to.
Yeah. Hmm.
So I feel like you have a good sensibility of like, let's start with this maybe like broader feedback, and then we'll like hone in, hone in, hone in, hone in to the point where it's like, I don't, this is maybe going to sound weird, but it's like you've almost earned your way to being like, how about this literal sentence or this literal
Yeah.
word? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas if you had started with like, how about this line of dialogue? It's like, yeah, that probably wouldn't sit great with
Yeah.
from the jump.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That I agree. I think that there is nuance to providing feedback, and recognizing as a producer your place,
Yeah.
knowing your place, even in the most collaborative and open of creative partnerships.
Yeah. Yeah. And that goes, I mean, that relationship dynamic like flips, right? Kind of as you get into other parts of the process where it's like, I'm not going to tell you how to make a schedule or what are,
Mhm.
what this another thing should
Yeah.
be. So it's a bit of like a kind of a dance, I suppose.
Yeah. 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 I do think somewhere, and I think this is maybe a good segue, is somewhere that a producer, I think, is within their right to come in and be like, these things are things that need to change, is when you're looking at a script through the lens of makeability.
Mhm.
Um, I, like the makeability is so important, especially for an early career filmmaker who is self-funding, making sure that you are writing something that is achievable given the resources that you have around you. And um, it's, I think there are even, there are things sometimes that like an early career filmmaker might not like, because they're just thinking about the story as they should be, and then it's the producer's job to make it happen. They're not thinking about like whether a location is going to be out of reach, or what makes that location out of reach, or like working with kids or working with animals or having some sort of special effects. Like
Yeah.
there are, these are all factors that are so important to take into account when developing, especially if you're like, yeah, earlier in your career and you're like, I want to make something. I want to make something so that I have a project to show the world what my sensibilities are and what my capabilities are, without needing to like, tap into all these resources. And um, I will say Permanent Scar is ambitious. It's an ambitious first narrative script. You've got a hospital setting, you've got kids, you've got special effects makeup, and we made it all work and it's a beautiful film. But those are definitely elements that are like, we got to make sure we can do this and do it right, do it well enough that It's not going to take someone out of the film.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, imagine if I had kept the car crash scene in there.
Yeah, see something like yeah. Um, that car crash would have been happening off screen, and then we would just as the viewer be seeing
Yes,
the aftermath of it.
yes. I mean, that first script that I wrote with the car crash, which had the car crash like fully, like
Fully in it,
we
yeah.
were in
Yeah.
the car like for many
Wow.
minutes, and there was, you know, aftermath and pulling people out and a whole thing. um as I was writing it, I was like, I can't afford this. Like, what am I doing? But it's just, I just had to write it that way at first. And
Mhm.
I'm really glad that I didn't stop myself from that, because I was like, this is just, again, this is the brain dump that needs to come out right now in order to have literally anything to work with in rewriting. Like literally anything. Like, remember, every single line of dialogue changed, like every single one.
Mhm.
So I do think that in that first draft, like, it's like a fine line as a writer, I think, with the makeability thing, because
Totally.
I think start with just like wherever you need to start, I would say, and
Mhm.
then, you know, work back into where you kind of need to be, which is probably where you kind of should have been all along, I would
Mhm.
say. And there was other like little stuff too in terms of makeability that came up during production, like, you know, there was always an ice cream truck in this script.
Yeah.
It wasn't until very towards the very end of the process that we were like, we got to kill this ice cream truck. Like, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
And then in the end, like a jingle and a shot of them eating ice cream, like totally achieved the same thing. And, you know, it probably would have been too much even in the edit to see them like walking to
Yeah.
the ice cream truck. Like, we just moved right along, and that was all you
Yeah.
really needed.
And this came up multiple times in the course of this project. Like, not every important event has to happen on screen.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and that was like my one, I remember my one big piece of feedback after I read the treatment was looking at the act structure. There was an act in there that um, was going to be difficult to execute, but was also like, I actually don't know that we need this. We need, this event needs to have played out, but we don't necessarily need to see it play out. I think it really is just such a testament to like what a living, breathing thing a story is, and the amount of different ways you can present a series of events.
Yeah, and it just proves that you have to be open to the process. Like,
Hmm.
really,
Hmm.
and be open-minded to it, because those challenges, those restrictions, if you're open-minded to it, if you think creatively, are going to result in something that is probably even better than what you could have hoped for.
Yeah, it is just such a trust the process. Know that just because something can't happen the way that you imagined in your mind for any number of reasons, it doesn't mean you have to scrap it. You might just have to get creative
Yeah,
and do it differently, and the results can be just as special.
yeah, yeah. Yay.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad you wrote that script and made that treatment and spent 6 weeks on that beautiful treatment, because that treatment is why we're here.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. We love a treatment. Do not overlook the treatment. It matters.
Treatment and collaboration.
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, collaboration on every step of the process is what got me to the finished
Mhm.
product of this film. So don't do anything alone in life or in filmmaking.
You're here.